There are discoveries that shake the foundations of history, but there are others that simply have no right to exist. There are finds that emerge as intruders in the archaeological record, artifacts that scream against accepted narratives and are, for that very reason, met with silence. The buried city we will discuss now belongs to this second kind. It does not appear in books, is not mentioned in university courses, and is almost never discussed in public, because, if it is real, it threatens to reopen chapters of the past that humanity considered closed. And worse, it exposes the possibility that entire peoples disappeared before history had even begun to be written. The starting point of this story is surprisingly simple: a routine excavation carried out by a team that expected to find nothing beyond known strata. The location, a remote region marked by layers of alluvial sediments, had already been explored countless times, but an anomalous sequence of rocks, recorded by satellite, suggested that something was buried there. Deep down, what no one imagined was that the signals would point not to an isolated structure, but to organized, aligned, repetitive remains. Clear indications of urban planning. When the first walls began to emerge from the subsoil, the researchers were taken over by perplexity. Nothing there corresponded to known cultures. Nothing. To understand why this finding matters, one must recall what official history states. According to traditional archaeology, the first cities emerged around 6,000 years ago. Places like Uruk in Mesopotamia and Hierakonpolis in Egypt are considered landmarks in the transition to complex societies. These urban centers were the products of slow processes of sedentarization, developed agriculture, and population growth. The academic narrative says that before these cities, there were only nomadic groups, scattered villages, and cultures that had not yet mastered the techniques necessary for large-scale works. It is a solid chronology, supported by centuries of research. But the city discovered under layers of silent earth does not fit into this framework. Its organization does not match any catalogued culture. The style of the forms, the design of the foundations, the logic of the internal spaces, everything points to a tradition that should not exist in that period. The first dating analysis, carried out with extreme care, suggests something that the researchers themselves resisted accepting. The city appears to be considerably older than the first known urban societies, and this simple detail would be enough to generate controversy. But there is more. The depth at which the city is located indicates that it was buried quickly, possibly by a large-scale natural event, catastrophic floods, tectonic instability, or even abrupt climate cycles. This type of burial preserves what is below and, at the same time, erases external signs that would help compose the puzzle. The inner walls reveal tool marks but not known tools. The inscriptions, if they can be called that, have repeated geometric patterns, similar to rudimentary mathematical codes. There are no images of deities, no mythological scenes, no human representations. The city is silent even in its symbolism. When the researchers released the first internal reports, the discomfort was immediate. Some claimed it was an error of interpretation. Others suggested it was a natural structure mistaken for architecture. But subsequent three-dimensional analysis showed that the angles, columns, and foundations obey calculations too precise to be geological formations. The city, if we can call it, that features streets, internal divisions, chambers, corridors, and something that seems to have been a central point of convergence. Nothing resembles a village. Nothing resembles the simple work of an isolated group. The scale suggests planning, coordination, purpose. It is at this point that the mystery becomes more troubling. If this city is truly as old as the initial analyses indicate, it implies that unknown peoples achieved levels of organization that, according to what we know, should not have existed at that time. This hypothesis has always been rejected for lack of evidence, but now, the evidence is there, buried, intact, inexplicable. Several experts began to propose parallel theories. One of the most conservative states that the dating may be incorrect. Perhaps the burial occurred long after the construction and the analyzed materials belong to different periods, creating the illusion of extreme antiquity. This theory tries to keep the city within the known chronology, but it fails when confronted with the sedimentary pattern around the structure, which suggests a single burial event. Other, less orthodox researchers suggest that the city may belong to a coastal people who disappeared after severe climate changes at the end of the last ice age. This hypothesis fits with folk reports of lost civilizations, passed down through generations in different cultures. We are not talking about grandiose myths here, but fragmented memories that could have survived as distant echoes of a forgotten past. According to this perspective, isolated groups would have migrated and shared knowledge that influenced later cultures without ever being recognized by history. There is yet another theory, bolder, defended by a small group of independent archaeologists. It proposes that we are facing an intermediate phase between nomadic societies and fully developed civilizations, a transitional stage we did not know existed. These people would have reached a surprising level of organization but, for unknown reasons, never expanded or left extensive records. Perhaps they were destroyed by natural events. Perhaps they were absorbed by other cultures. Perhaps they simply did not survive long enough to change the course of history. Throughout the investigation, a silent question began to bother the researchers. Why does no one openly acknowledge the city's existence? Internal reports circulate in restricted circles, heated debates occur in closed meetings, and most of the information does not reach the public. Some archaeologists confess, privately, that they fear this finding will be used to fuel sensationalist theories. Others admit that the city's existence requires a deep revision of human chronology, something that academia, by its very nature, is slow to accept. Not out of ill intent, but because every new piece of information must survive a storm of scientific rigor. Meanwhile, the excavations advance slowly. Each removed layer reveals new questions. The absence of religious art, the strange geometry of the marks, the total silence on cultural identities. Everything contributes to an enigma that seems to grow instead of shrinking. The buried city does not scream answers, it offers only questions. And so we arrive at the most intriguing point, the verdict. Perhaps this city is just a local anomaly. Perhaps it is evidence that human history has poorly documented chapters. Or perhaps it is just the first piece of a much larger puzzle, whose final image is still hidden under layers of time and oblivion. The fact is simple. Something happened there. Something that challenges what we believe we know. Something that calls for caution, but also for the courage to investigate. And now, after we have traversed this unstable ground between evidence and mystery together, only one question remains. Faced with this finding that no one officially acknowledges, which interpretation seems more plausible to you? The echo of a forgotten civilization, or just an isolated fragment distorted by time?